So right now we're learning biomolecules, right? We learned that there are 4 types of biomolecules, which are carbohydrates, lipid, protein, and last but not least, nucleic acid. And today our focus is going to be on lipid. Lipid as a biomolecule as compared to other 3 biomolecules is rather unique. It is very different from the other 3 biomolecules in the sense that it is really not a huge molecule. Not a huge molecule. As compared to carbohydrates, protein, nucleic acid, it is not particularly big. It is also not built from a monomer. So lipid is not really a polymer, it is a molecule and it doesn't really have a building block. It doesn't have a repeated unit of monomers. Not built from monomer. And if you look into the molecules that are under lipids, they are very, very diverse in terms of structure. They look very different. If you look at starch, glucose, sucrose, fructose, under carbohydrates, they look very similar. But if you look at the examples under lipids, they can be very, very different and you couldn't really identify the differences. You can really identify the differences between different lipids. So what is lipid? Lipid, everyone's quite familiar with it. It is really the fat family, right? Everything that feels fat, looks like fat, they're kind of under the families of lipids. Generally, they are water insoluble. They don't like water. In other words, for water insoluble, in a scientific name is hydrophobic. Hydrophobic. Hydro means water and phobic means dislike. It is generally function as some sort of energy storage, but there are specific lipids that works differently. But generally they are good energy storage and they are mainly made of carbon and hydrogen. That makes lipid very hydrophobic. The reason is because there's really no oxygen with hydrogen in order to make a hydrogen bond with other molecules. Atoms inside the lipids are covalently bonded. So covalently bonded between carbon and hydrogen. And they are non-polar. This makes it don't like water because water is polar. So polar molecules like water. So there are a few types of lipid that we're going to focus on today. Mainly 2 types. Lipid. The first one is fat. And another word for it is triglycerides. Triglycerides. If you look from the name, you know that it is something of 3. Tri means 3. Glycerides is a word derived from glycerol, which is a type of alcohol. And a lot of students have this misconception that we have 3 glycerol in the triglycerides, but it's actually not. Triglycerides is a molecule made of 1 glycerol. So we have 1 glycerol and 3 fatty acids. So fatty acids are really long-chain hydrocarbons, so fatty acid. They are long-chain hydrocarbons attached to a carboxyl group, and they are some sort of acid. They're bonded to glycerol through covalent bond. So this is the general shape of a triglycerides. 1 glycerol and 3 fatty acids. And they are, just like any lipid, they are hydrophobic. They don't like water because they couldn't form hydrogen bond. And this particular reaction is formed like any other monomers forming polymers. It is formed through the reaction of dehydration synthesis. Dehydration synthesis. It means that when a covalent bond is formed, water molecules will be released. Since there are 3 covalent bonds being formed to make a triglycerides, you're going to release 3 water molecules. Some of the common things that you can find to have triglycerides are corn, olive oils, or generally any kind of oils, any kind of animals oils, sunflower oils, food that are rich in fats, they all have triglycerides. The second type of lipid that we want to focus on is steroids. It is a lipid in 4-carbon fused ring. So what's the carbon fused ring? It means that the carbons are kind of making a ring shapes, and you have 4 of them and they're fused together. So when we're drawing the abbreviated structure, you will generally look at something that looks like this. Some sort of 4 rings. What we're drawing right now is a carbon backbone. So all these pointy parts here represent 1 carbon, and this sticks represents the covalent bond between carbons. The structure is not the focus of this class, but when you look at this shape, you know that this represents a steroid. What are some of the examples of steroids? We have hormones. Hormones are steroids, and it regulates body functions. So it regulates body function. And we know that it can help build muscle. It can enhance your muscle. And last but not least, we also know that vitamin D are a type of steroid, so it's important. And to make steroid, our body needs cholesterol. So cholesterol is what we call the precursor. Before we make a steroid, we need cholesterol. That's why vitamin D is considered a fat-soluble vitamin.